Alright, let's get started with another game of Revised 40. This round it's going to be myself on the left piloting my blue-white control deck, and my opponent Jeff on the right piloting mono-black. I'm on the play, and I start with an island and a pass to Jeff. Jeff plays a swamp and passes back to me, and after a 5-turn staring contest between the two decks, the first spell of the game is going to be a Navineral's Disc from Jeff's side. Navineral's Disc is an artifact that can act as a sweeper. So that is met with a disenchant from my side. Disenchant a pretty clean answer to Navineral's Disc, especially since it enters play tapped. The disc does threaten my main finishers, which are Sarah Angels, so very good to get the disc off the board early. After another small staring contest and a discard to hand size from my side, Jeff goes with a Sengir Vampire. That's one of the biggest threats that black has. It's a 4/4 flyer for 5, and it is met with a Swift Swords to Plowshares, gaining Jeff 4 life, putting him up to 24. On my side of the board, I'm now ready to cast a Sarah Angel, having that double blue up for Counterspell, in case Jeff decides to use something like Terror or Paralyze to limit my Sarah Angel's attacking potential. Jeff on his turn, counting up his mana, and decides to pay 6 into a Drain Life, which would deal 4 damage to the Sarah Angel. That is, of course, counterspelled. I would very much like my Sarah Angel to live, since it is one of the only finishers in the blue-white control deck. I get in for 4 damage with the Sarah Angel, and tapping for 5 again, cast a second copy of Sarah Angel, still representing counterspell with my 3 mana up there. Jeff going for a second copy of Sengir Vampire. That's another easy Swords to Plowshares target, gaining Jeff 4 life, putting him back at 24. Sengir Vampire does have flying, which is very bad for my side, being able to stop the Sarah Angel attacks. So pass back to Jeff. And Jeff decides to tap 4 for a Mind Twist, where X is equal to 3, so I would have to discard my entire hand.
Oh no. This is a nightmare.
I respond with a Power Sink, which will counter the Mind Twist unless Jeff pays 5. Looks like Jeff has the Dark Ritual though, which will give him some additional mana to help pay for Power Sink. So the Mind Twist does resolve, gets rid of a second copy of Power Sink, along with a Wrath of God. So passing back to my turn, I attack for 8, putting Jeff down to 8 with my Sarah Angels. Jeff draws for the turn and scoops it up. Alright, moving into game number 2, my opponent Jeff is on the play on the right side there. He leads with a Swamp and passes back to me. I lead with a Plains and a Soul Ring. Soul Ring, probably one of the strongest openings in Revised 40, especially for the control deck. It allows me to play an early Sarah Angel and have more mana for things like Power Sink. So we pass back to Jeff, who plays a Swamp and passes. And on my turn, I go for a Plains and a pass back to Jeff. Even if I did have a Sarah Angel here, I don't want to run it out into a potential Terror or other removal spell without counterspell backup. So Jeff goes for a Navineral's Disc, and I do not have the disenchant this time. Navineral's Disc is pretty relevant here. It destroys all artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. So since Jeff doesn't have any creatures on his side of the board, there's almost no risk for him using it to destroy my Soul Ring, especially given that I only have a single island. Destroying my Soul Ring takes me off of a lot of mana to use for Power Sink. So Jeff uses his Navineral's Disc to destroy my Soul Ring, and then casts Demonic Tutor to go get any card out of his deck. Given that this is Revised 40, Demonic Tutor is almost certainly going to go and get something like a Mind Twist. Mind Twist is one of the best cards that you can have against a control deck. Making them discard their entire hand of counterspells and interaction is one of the best ways to stop any control deck in this format. So we'll see if Jeff immediately goes for the Mind Twist. And he decides instead to go for another copy of Navineral's Disc. This one will probably be used to stop later Sarah Angels that might be coming into play on the blue-white side of things, and I still don't have the disenchant to handle this one. So Jeff now thinking about his options. Navineral's Disc, almost certainly not the card that he tutored. And there's a Sengir Vampire. That's that 4/4 flyer for 5 that gets bigger every time it deals damage, and that is met with a quick Swords to Plowshares. A 4-turn clock is still really fast for the control deck to handle, so Swords to Plowshares will put Jeff to 24 and exile his Vampire. So I play my land and pass back to Jeff, who counts up the number of cards in my hand and decides to go for a Mind Twist for 5, leaving a single swamp open. At this point, Jeff could have a Dark Ritual in play, giving him access to 3 mana. So I am concerned about that, which is why I go for a Power Sink for 5. But Jeff has the double Dark Ritual.
It's not true! That's impossible!
I have never, ever seen a double Dark Ritual to pay for a Power Sink in Revised 40. It's a really good play by Jeff there. It could have been correct just to use a simple counterspell to deal with the Mind Twist, but I don't know that you're really supposed to play around double Dark Ritual. But could have been a mistake from my part. So Jeff plays a land and passes back, and I go for the Disenchant on Navineral's Disc during his end step to unlock things like Sarah Angel. Passing back to Jeff, he plays a land and passes, and I don't draw a land, and I pass it back to Jeff. At this point in the game, I've just been Mind Twisted, so I'm very low on cards in hand and very low on interactive cards. So I decide to counterspell this third and final Navineral's Disc. Jeff with a Black Vice on his side of the table. This Black Vice deals damage to me if I have more than 4 cards in hand, which isn't a problem right now, but control decks do like to draw cards, so this will be a problem in the future. Unfortunately, both of my disenchants have already been used to deal with Navineral's Discs, so if I get up to too many cards in hand, this Black Vice can easily deal a lot of damage to me. Thinking about my options, I go for a Sarah Angel. Notice that I still have the double blue up on my side to potentially counter any piece of interaction Jeff might have. Jeff goes for the Drain Life for 4, which does take out the Sarah Angel, so I do not have the counterspell in hand. Drain Life gains Jeff 4 life, putting him back to 28. It's a pretty high life total, but luckily for the control deck, it likes to play the long game, so having a lot of life isn't necessarily the biggest problem, but that Black Vice is. So I go for a Jayemdae Tome, which does draw me into more interactive cards, but unfortunately feeds the Black Vice on Jeff's side. So drawing extra cards every turn is only going to make the Vice deal more and more damage to me. Jeff goes for the double Dark Ritual, and goes for a Drain Life targeting me. Drain Life can target creatures or players, and it gains its controller life equal to however much damage it does. Luckily I have the Power Sink, so the life total swing isn't too big. Passing back to Jeff, he taps out again for another Drain Life. This is absolutely brutal. Gaining him this much life and dealing a lot of life to me can greatly speed up his clock, so I go for a second copy of Power Sink. End of turn, I activate the Jayemdae Tome to draw an extra card. Still not quite within range of this Black Vice dealing damage to me, since I do keep having to use cards from my hand to answer Jeff's threats. So end of turn there, I draw off the Jayemdae Tome again, playing a land and passing back to Jeff. Still just waiting on Jeff to play something like a Sengir Vampire that I can hopefully respond to. Does not look like I have the counterspell, so I just draw a card off of my Jayemdae Tome at the end of his turn. And now I'm up to 6 cards in hand, 5 from the Tome and 6 from my draw step, so I take 1 damage off the Black Vice. And I go for a Control Magic targeting Sengir Vampire. This brings the vampire into play under my control, which is almost better than a removal spell, since now it's not only gone from Jeff's side, but now I can use it to attack Jeff. Drawing off the book here again, and going to my turn. No follow-up threat from Jeff, so the Sengir Vampire is free to get in for damage on my side. That Black Vice still ticking down my life total one at a time. At this point I am getting somewhat low on cards in my library, and not wanting to take too much damage from the Vice, I decide to stop drawing cards off of the Jayemdae Tome. Jeff goes for a second copy of Black Vice. So even better that I stopped deciding to draw off of the tome, since now I am taking 2 damage for each card above 4. So I take 2 damage and get in for 4 with Jeff's Sengir Vampire. Going to my turn, taking 2 damage off of those Vices. I still can't get cards out of my hand quickly enough to get under the Vice damage, so chances are there are a lot of lands or interactive pieces in my hand that I just can't get rid of. So Jeff passes the turn back to me. I take some more damage off of those Black Vices. And I get a quick library count from Jeff. Any player who has played Revised 40 will know what's coming when someone asks how many cards are in your library. So I go for 2 mana plus X, and Brain Geyser targeting Jeff for his entire library, which will cause him to lose the game by attempting to draw off an empty library. So I pass the turn, Jeff attempts to draw off an empty deck, and that's the game. Blue-White Control takes this one down with a 2-0 win. Definitely a lot of cards like Sengir Vampire and Sarah Angel were big threats in this game, but Brain Geyser ends up closing it out. Taking a look at our most valuable cards for this matchup, in first we have Mind Twist, being able to discard the control player's hand twice during this game. In second we have Brain Geyser, being able to close out the game despite the mono-black player being at a really high life total. And in third we have Dark Ritual, being able to push those Mind Twists through even copies of Power Sync. If you guys do want to see deck techs on either of these decks or more gameplay like this, be sure to check out the Revised 40 playlist. I'll see you guys next time.